That would have been fun.
I just quickly unmuted myself to show you that I have a mix of fish food here. It's like a mini YouTube video clip right now.
Go, show us, and we get it for free. This is exciting.
Yes, well, my YouTube videos are for free.
How many fish do you have, Taryn?
I think there's probably about 35 to 40.
What are all their names?
I have one that I've specifically named, and her name is Jill. She's a Jack Dempsey cichlid that I've had for 5 years. She's my firstborn child. I absolutely love her. And but mostly I've got a lot of the Australian rainbows. So yeah, it's pretty intense. Yeah.
Thank you for entertaining us.
No worries.
All right, I think we might be ready to get started. If anyone joins, they can join whenever.
Yeah, we had a few join late last week as well. So guys, same sort of setup as last week. We will keep you guys on mute, or if you guys can keep yourselves on mute as we go. And we're going to get Claire to chat. And the same thing as last week. Anything you want to say, any questions you have, pop them in that chat box. I'll be watching it the whole time. And then we're going to open it up for questions and answers towards the end. And I know with Riley and Steve last week, had a lot of questions. It was really entertaining, and they were lucky enough, well, we were lucky enough to have them stay back with us for a little while longer. So probably now's a good time to say if you need to go to the bathroom, go. Like we said, if you need snacks, get them now. Otherwise, we might hand it over to Claire. What do you reckon, T? Ready?
Yeah.
All right. So, guys, Claire's from Phillip Island Nature Parks. Hopefully, a few of you have been down there to Phillip Island before. She is part of the education team down there and the interpretation team. So think of all the schools that head down there. Claire works really closely with them. She's going to be talking to us about a program that she's been running down on Phillip Island to keep it nice and healthy and beautiful for all of the marine life down there. So a few more people entering, but I'm going to hand over to you, Claire. The floor is yours.
Lovely, thanks Peter. Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Claire. I've been a ranger down here at Phillip Island for 6 years now, and it's been a pretty incredible job. So I did marine biology at university and was lucky enough to land myself a job with the penguins, and I started off working out there overnight time, and then yeah, got some education work during the day until I ended up full-time, and it's been a pretty incredible last 6 years. We're really lucky here on Phillip Island because we have this beautiful mix of terrestrial and ocean environments that really meet and come together. At the moment it's a whale season, so we've got our whales coming past our coastline every day at the moment. We've got the largest colony of Australian fur seals here. We've got 30,000 Australian fur seals. We've got the largest colony of little penguins. We've got 32,000 little penguins. And we have really significant breeding colonies of short-tailed shearwaters, which are a seabird. If you haven't heard of them, they're amazing. We also have the endangered hooded plover. We have eastern barred bandicoot. So we're really lucky here on just how much wildlife, both marine and that island wildlife as well. And a big reason why we have so much here is because of our little penguins. So we are not for profit, which means that when people come to visit and watch our little penguins cross the beach every night, they pay money to do so, and that money goes back into the conservation work that we do here at Phillip Island. So some of the significant conservation efforts that have gone in here is things like we are now fox free on Phillip Island, which makes it a really good home for our nesting seabirds and our other wildlife. We have 1,800 hectares of land that we are continually planting the right vegetation, removing the weeds. We had the largest housing buyback that we know of in the world for wildlife for our little penguins as well. So there was an entire town that got removed between the 80s and 2010 to create home for our little penguins. So all of those things that we've been doing have created a really great habitat for our wildlife, and I feel really lucky to have been a part of that here at Phillip Island. Today though, I'm going to be sharing with you probably the project that I've been most passionate about while I've been working here. and it's a marine debris program. So I assume that most of you guys know what marine debris is, or that rubbish that floats around on the ocean or in the ocean and washes up on our shores. So I'm going to be telling you about what I've been doing, working with our volunteers to remove that, and the education that's surrounded around that, and how we're hoping to make a difference. But more than anything, I'm hoping today that this presentation might inspire you guys to go out there and make a change, whether it's with marine debris or something else that you're passionate about within the oceans, because I'm guessing you're very passionate about our oceans and our marine wildlife if you're part of this program at the moment. Does anyone have any questions before I get started? Or are we ready to jump in? No? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint to share with you today. Lovely. Just been a little bit slow, sorry. There we go. Can everybody see that? Great. And just yell out at any time if I am going too fast, or if you want me to repeat something, or if you didn't understand what I just said. I have had quite a bit of coffee this morning, so I will talk fast, I know that. Yeah, so Phillip Island is right on the Southern Ocean and Bass Strait, not too far from Melbourne, but we do get some pretty wild Bass Strait weather hitting our shorelines, and those waves and storms hitting our beaches as well. And we do find quite a lot of rubbish hitting our shores, particularly on our southern coastline, so where it is meeting that Bass Strait and that wild weather off the Southern Ocean. So I guess to start off, I'll do a quick overview of what marine debris is and why is it a problem. So you can see there in that picture, we've got a bag full of all the rubbish that's just been picked off this beach here at Cape Woolamai. So this one here was done a couple of years ago, but this is a pretty normal collection on Cape Woolamai. We've got all of those things that may have been either left on the beach or have washed in. So we can see in this bag, we've got tuna oil. This here would have been used for fishing to attract other fish. We've got some ropes there as well, which also would have come from fishing boats. Got fishing line down here as well, that they most likely would have come from recreational fishers. We also have Coke bottles, beer bottles, orange peels. A lot of those things were probably left on this beach or a nearby beach and have just washed straight back up onto shore. And then over here in the sieve, we've got all the, what we always tend to call them microplastics, but some of these are macroplastics as well. So these are basically, whenever I'm going to use the term probably microplastic today for anything that refers to these broken up small pieces of rubbish, even though some of these ones in here aren't as small as what microplastic would be, which is generally about a 5-cent coin or smaller. So these here are all those bits that would have started off like what's in the bag, and they've been beaten around by the ocean for so long that they've broken down into smaller and smaller pieces until they look like this. One thing you probably can't see too well there, my mouse is just pointing on it, this one here is a biofilter. These here started washing up on our beaches a couple of years ago by their thousands, almost overnight. They all just suddenly appeared on our beaches. We've never been able to track down exactly where they came from, but we believe that there was a ship that may have dropped a whole bunch of these in 2017. And although we don't find them by the hundreds anymore, they're still prevalent out there in the marine environment. We'll still normally get them on every beach at every collection that we do. So the marine debris does stick around out there for a very, very long time. So why is it a problem? Particularly here on Phillip Island, some of the main reasons is the way that our animals interact with the rubbish. So this is one of our little penguins here on Phillip Island. And it has taken what looks to me like a bait bag into its burrow to use as nesting material. This may not have huge effects on the penguins, but it's certainly not good. We can see that this penguin is sitting on eggs. And it means that those chicks are going to be born into rubbish. there probably would be some toxins and chemicals within that rubbish that may affect those chicks, although there has been no formal study done on that to be able to give you much clarity onto the direct impacts, but it's certainly not something that you want to see in a burrow. They're quite creative with the sort of rubbish that they'll take into their burrow too. It's often bits of plastic like this or a chip packet. We think they find it quite insulating and warm for their burrow. One of our researchers did find a $5 note though one day. The penguins had decided to decorate their burrow with money. There's a bit of debate whether it was a $5 or $50 note, but I think it was a $5 note. So this one here is much more serious than finding it in their burrows, and I do apologise. This image and the next one are quite confronting. This is one of our Australian fur seals here at Phillip Island. This photo was taken by a researcher, and this young seal has been entangled in a rope. So when our seals are out there in the water, particularly the young juvenile seals when they're learning to swim, they tend to play with rubbish, or particularly things like fishing nets when they're out there. One of the ways that our Australian fur seals learn to swim is by playing with seaweed when they're young. So they'll pick up bits of seaweed and they'll toss it to one another and throw it up in the air. It's really adorable to watch. But they don't see like you and I do. They see in shapes and shades. So this big purple fishing net there would look exactly the same to them in the water as what a big strand of seaweed would in the water. And once they get caught in it like this, they can't get it off. And unfortunately, it's generally the young seals that get caught in it. And as they keep growing, that rope won't grow and it will strangle them, which is really awful as they grow. So we do have researchers out there on the rocks that go out there pretty frequently out to the seal colony, and they will try and remove any rubbish or some sort of man-made structure that might be around our seals. Unfortunately, it's really hard. So a full-grown seal, it will take up to 6 full-grown humans to hold down a seal to be able to cut something off. And that's if we manage to catch it, or if that seal is out there at the rocks at the time that we're out there. So we untangle about 20 a year, but we do think there could be up to maybe 350 Victorian seals a year getting caught up in plastic that we're not getting to. And this one is a really horrifying image. This one here isn't a photo from Phillip Island, but we see the same effect happening here. I think by memory this photo is Lord Howe Island, which is within Australia as well. This here is an albatross chick, and it has been fed so much plastic that it died, and as it's decomposed, all that plastic has been shown in its stomach. We have quite a number of seabirds that nest here at Phillip Island. The two main ones to mention are both our little penguins and our short-tailed shearwater birds. Little penguins do seem to be a little bit more protected from eating marine debris than other seabirds. And that's because they live primarily in the water and they feed differently. But most of our flying seabirds, like the short-tailed shearwater, up here at their nose, they've got what's called, we refer to them as a tube nose seabird. And they smell out their food. They can smell their food up to 100 kilometers away. That would be like me smelling what one of you guys might have had for breakfast in Melbourne. If one of you are in Melbourne right now, all the way from Phillip Island, I would be able to smell what you've had for breakfast, but I can't because I'm not a tube nose seabird. This is how they find their food, because all of the ocean looks the same and you can't see the food that's in it when you're flying around, so they rely on smell. The plastic though, when it's floating around out there in the water, all the little bits of algae stick to the plastic, and it goes through a process which we call biofouling. And this biofouling, all that algae that sticks to the outside of that plastic, it then creates the same smell that these birds are looking for in their food. So it creates the same smell. And so we find that these seabirds are unfortunately flying up to 100 kilometers to go and eat plastic without realizing it. Our short-tailed shearwaters here on Phillip Island, they're incredible. I love them, they're my favorite. They can fly, they fly from the bottom of the world, so they'll spend some time down around Antarctica, they'll breed here on Phillip Island, and then they'll fly all the way up to the Arctic Circle at the top of the world every single year before they fly back down here ready to breed again. So they can go through huge flights. They can survive some of the roughest waters in the world. But we've found up to 100% of the dead fledglings have had plastic in their stomachs that we've done autopsies on. So it's definitely having a significant impact on our wildlife here on Phillip Island. So why do we care? I would imagine that for most of us, that those 3 images have been enough for you to care. I certainly hope so. And I'm sorry to have shared them with you so early on a Saturday morning. But we also care because our oceans are so important to our everyday life. 2 out of every 3 breaths comes from the ocean. All that oxygen is produced by our oceans. Our oceans feed 1 billion people around the world as their primary source of protein. Our oceans also take in a whole lot of that CO2 that we put into the atmosphere, so we can turn on our light switches and drive our cars. Our oceans are also taking a huge amount of that there in as well. Our oceans are so important to our everyday life, and that includes the wildlife that lives in there as well. So that's why we care. It's really important, not just on an emotional side of how we feel about that wildlife, but also to us being able to live our life. So I imagine that most of you are possibly feeling a little helpless right now. It's very confronting to see all those things, hear all those things, and to know what sort of damage is happening right here in Australia, but also globally. So that's why I want to introduce you to probably the most inspiring person I've ever met. And that is this man here, Pat. So Pat is a volunteer here on Phillip Island. And he has made such a significant difference to our marine debris problem, just by turning up and being Pat, by being him, by doing what he cares about. So Pat grew up on King Island, which is between here and Tasmania, if you don't know where King Island is. So when he was young, he's in his 70s now. He's a lot older than he looks. And he remembers beaches being pristine, no rubbish in sight when he was growing up in King Island. And he found his way onto Facebook a few years ago for the first time. And he found a King Island Facebook group, a community Facebook group. And he connected onto that because there was people that he grew up with on there. And he was able to stay in touch with the community that he grew up in and that he loved. And he was horrified to see how much rubbish was coming onto the beaches on King Island, so people were posting about it. Pat doesn't live on Phillip Island. He actually lives in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne, but he worked on Phillip Island for a little while. So he decided that the first thing he needed to do was get in his car, drive out to the closest island he knew, and start seeing if there was any rubbish on our beaches. And he found our rubbish. He found a lot of rubbish, and he started picking it up. I can't remember, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember the next slide. So Pat just started walking along our beaches once every month, or he comes down 2 days in a row every month, and he walks the entire circumference of Phillip Island, which is huge. I wouldn't even attempt that myself. And since 2017, he's picked up almost 1/2 a ton of rubbish on his own. By just getting out there onto our beaches and walking along them, because he doesn't want to see our beaches like they are. I think this is incredible for anyone to go out there and pick up 458 kilograms of rubbish on their own and to not get put off by it, not get out there and go, oh my God, there's too much rubbish, I don't want to do it today. He has just kept turning up, knowing that he can't pick up every piece and knowing that more is going to wash in. He wants to pick it up before it washes back out, and that's what he's doing. And Pat had worked with the nature parks for a little while, so he was coming in and he just said, look, I'm picking up all this rubbish, can I put it in your bins? And so he was coming in once a month using our bins to chuck all the rubbish into, and he was talking about he kept finding all these balloons on the beaches, and not just one balloon, lots of balloons. And at the same time that this was happening, we were also working with Zoos Victoria with their balloons campaign, which is When Balloons Fly, Seabirds Die. And this campaign, have you guys heard of When Balloons Fly, Seabirds Die? Yeah, I thought so. When this campaign was getting started, the reason why it was started was because CSIRO had identified balloons as the #1 marine debris threat to our wildlife, to our marine wildlife. And we had seen the effects here on Phillip Island. And Pat was also talking about all these balloons that he kept seeing, but we had no idea how many. So it's one thing to turn around and just go, oh yeah, there's lots of balloons. But somebody's always going to turn around and go, you want me to stop using balloons? Well, how many balloons are you finding? They want a quantitative number. And we also thought, well, we know there's lots of other rubbish out there, but we really have no idea. Even our researchers here on Phillip Island who were cutting the ropes off of seals or the fishing line off of seals and dissecting our birds to get the rubbish out of their tummies after they died to see how much, we had no idea of what sort of rubbish was making up most of our debris here on Phillip Island. So I got the lucky job of creating a volunteer group that basically turned one Pat into many, many Pats. And we suddenly had lots of Pats heading out there onto our beaches to collect the rubbish every month. So Pat still walks the entire circumference of Phillip Island every month to pick up all the rubbish. Nothing will stop him. But we also have dedicated groups of volunteers going out onto individual beaches and doing a really thorough clean. They'll spend 2 or 3 hours walking along that one beach and picking up all of the rubbish that they can find. After that, once a month at the end of every month, we get together as a group and we sort through all of those bags of rubbish. So this is just one beach here of what we picked up. We pour it all into the middle of the table and then we separate it out into its different categories. So you can see here we've separated all of the rope together. We'll also do this one's paper and cardboard. We've got glass and ceramics. We've got rubber. There'll also be individual fishing items, consumer plastics, packaging plastics. So we put it into groups. So we can't identify every single individual piece, but we start to get a really clear picture. And we also recorded individual items of some of those ones we're really interested in, like those biofilters that I mentioned at the start that I pointed out in that bag. And also, oh, there's a biofilter in this one here. You can see just there, there's a little biofilter. We collected one there. And also balloons. I individually identifying how many balloons we were getting. So over the last few years, since 2017, we have picked up 110,000 pieces of marine debris off of our beaches. So it's an incredible amount that we've just gone out there and picked up off our beach and removed. But one of the big things we've been able to get from this as well is that since we started to now, we've had a 63% reduction in the number of balloons that we've been finding on our beaches. And this is pretty significant. So that is at this stage showing that the When Balloons Fly, Seabirds Die campaign worked, that people actually stopped using as many balloons outside, releasing them, which is going to affect our wildlife. So that's why quantitative data is so important. This one here is really early on. So that's looking from between, when we first started to 2 years later. So it will take another few years of good data to really show if that trend is correct. It may just be that volunteers decided they didn't want to pick up balloons anymore and we had no idea. But that one there is unlikely. We think that we have had a significant drop in balloons because of that campaign. We've also run a couple of island-wide community events as well. So we get as many people in the community as we can to come on out and pick up all the rubbish they can within a couple of hours, and then we sort through it. So with these ones, I think there's been 3 of them so far. We've had almost 400 volunteers, almost 800 hours, and 27,000 pieces of plastic have been removed within those 3 events. These are really important because we want the community involved. We don't want just 40 individual volunteers knowing about the problem. We want everybody to know about the problem, and we want everybody to kind of become ambassadors for our beaches. couple of other things that have happened throughout this program is we started finding really interesting things along the way, and one of them were these. These are little fish tags, and it took me a long time to find exactly which these here were used for. The cray fishermen in the local area through Bass Strait all across Victoria will tag some of the crayfish that they catch and then put them back in the water. And so they've been working with the fisheries department because they want to manage their fisheries better, both for their own future so that they've still got crayfish to be able to catch for the future, but also to look after the population. So I've gone out on some of the local crayfishing boats here just to kind of get an idea of the industry and what it's like. And they're so passionate. One of the fishermen down here is possibly one of the most sustainable minded people that I've ever met. So we like to always have this idea of how we think sometimes commercial fishermen can be, but often they're the ones that have the biggest stake in making sure our oceans are sustainable. And that's important to remember, that we've got to work together, not against each other, I think. But this here is a crayfish tag. So every time we find one of these, I would guess we've probably found maybe 40 or 50 of these over time. We send them off to the fisheries department, and they will actually give us the data on that individual crayfish of what its life was when it was tagged, how big it was, how big it may have been when they recaptured it and then released it again, and where it was from. So that's really cool. I got to develop another program, which has been my second favorite, maybe my equal favorite, and it's called Cheppy Chick. So over the last 5 years, I've gone on 78 school visits across Victoria, from far east Gippsland all the way to West Melbourne suburbs. And we've talked to prep to grade 2 students about the importance of reducing the amount of plastic they use. We do this with all school students that come through and all adult tour groups that come through as well. We talk about how important it is to use less plastic, because otherwise we'll only ever be Pats going out there, picking up rubbish and putting it in the bin. And the next time you get out there, there's going to be more rubbish that you're going to pick up and you're going to put in the bin. And that's all that will ever happen. You'll only ever keep picking up the same pieces of plastic unless we actually create a change at the source of the plastic. So where is that plastic being created? How can we stop it ending up on our beaches altogether? And I think starting with the youngest people in our community is the most important, because these kids, these students, they go home to their families and they talk about the importance of not using straws anymore, or plastic forks or plastic cups. And that may encourage their parents, their grandparents, their aunties, their uncles, their friends to actually stop doing that. And they will hopefully move through their life also trying to make a difference as well. To help with that education message, this is plastic that we've collected in the Turn the Tide program, and we commissioned a local artist to create an art piece with it. This art piece sits in the Penguin Parade Visitor Centre, which not this year because this year is strange with COVID-19, but generally we get 1 million visitors who would walk past this piece of art every single year. Just to point something out, these seals, that beautiful fur on those seals, they're cigarette butt filters. So Ricardo, who made this, he unraveled them all to make this fur. So we do get a lot of cigarette butts, unfortunately. Most of the back of this here is things like thongs to create the foam. We've got all the plastics, we've got all the balloons and the rope. So this is the end of my presentation, and this is a message that at the end of one of the programs that I ran around marine debris with some primary school students, asked them all to put a pledge in the sand, and I really liked this one. It was, "I will not litter, I promise." And I hope that every time that students write these pledges in the sand on the beach when they finish a talk, that we will have all the other people in the community go for a walk and they'll read these messages and they might go, right, there's people who care. I should change, because so much of the changes we make are social changes. And by creating a great social behavior of not littering, of not using as much plastic, is what will make a really, really big difference. So I love getting to go out there every day, and this is a part of my job, something that I get to make a change every day by encouraging other people to make a change. But I really want to attribute so much of this to Pat, who just went out one day and started picking up rubbish. Because what Pat started has grown into something so much bigger than what I think Pat understands or will ever understand. And he's so humble that he would never attribute it to himself either. But yeah, I guess I just want it to be a nice reminder that you don't need to go out every month. You don't need to go out all the time. You don't need to make really big changes sometimes. Sometimes it's just that little thing that you do can turn into something so much bigger. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or you've learned something, or I've inspired you, or Pat's inspired you. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll throw it over to you guys if you do have any questions. Yeah.
Sorry, my screen's playing up. I'm back. Thank you, Claire. Oh my gosh, that was so interesting. I really enjoyed hearing all about Pat. I want to meet this Pat. I want to be a Pat, actually. Amazing. And this program that you set up as well, with all the volunteers across Bass Coast. How often have you gone out? Did you say 3 times already this year?
So that is the community program. We do that one every 6 months. The one with the volunteers that go out regularly, that's once every month. We haven't been able to do anything since February this year just because of COVID-19. But hopefully in summer we'll have a community event. So look out for that if anyone's interested in coming along to that, because anyone can turn up. We'll put that on our Facebook page and other places as well. So we get quite a lot of people travel down from Melbourne to take part in those ones twice a year. So that's a really cool one if you want to go out and have a go and see what's out there and join like-minded people.
Cool. That was going to be one of my questions. I was going to say, if one of these guys wants to get involved in one of these cleanup events on the island, just have a look on the Facebook page and keep an eye on that.
Yeah, have a look on that. Our general volunteering is 18 years and older. So the general Turn the Tide program will be a little bit trickier for anyone that's under 18. But the island-wide events that, we do every 6 months, that is open to all ages. So you'll be able to come along to those.
Now, we've got a couple of questions coming up in the chat, but before I go to them, I got a bit of a question for you, because I know a lot of the time we have these amazing ideas like you did doing this island-wide event and the cleanups, but how did you get it out there? How did you advertise it? Who did you reach out to? I know Phillip Island Nature Parks has a following, but if we're just an individual, did you go to like local newspapers or?
Yeah, that's where we got most of the volunteers for this program to begin with. Is we posted it online on our website under our volunteer page, but our biggest reach came from the local paper. So we asked the local paper to pop it in, and often your local papers, if it's for a good cause as well, they won't charge you. But you can always ask, or you might be able to fundraise some money to get to that spot anyway. But yeah, just the local paper, there's a lot of people that are really keen. We have quite a high retiree base in the program, and that's the best way to reach them is in the local paper. And then we also, I believe we might have put it on Facebook at some point and within our organisation as well. So we've got a really good mix between the younger generation and the older generation in the program. And that's been really great to actually get that in a generational, I guess, group, because the older generation has a lot of experience and a lot of things that we can learn from. And often our younger generation might be a bit more up to date with some of the threats or the impacts of plastic, or maybe some of them have just come out of uni. And it also means that the outcome of the program, so talking in the local community, has a bigger spread as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that really importance of like networking within your community as well. And do you guys work in association with any other groups down around Phillip Island when you're doing these things?
We do, primarily with the events. We work with community groups. So there's a couple of really great community groups down here. We've got Boomerang Bags. So like all Boomerang bags, they're sewing bags from upcycled materials. So we work really closely with them. There's a Love Your Streets group who they target picking up rubbish on the streets before it can wash to the beach.
Yeah.
And we also work with Plastic Free Phillip Island, which is a community group that go out and talk to local businesses and encourage them to change their plastic items to either compostable or paper or more environmentally friendly items. So a lot of the takeaway places down here, if you come to Phillip Island at any point, you'll notice that I think just about every single one of them now use compostable straws. There's much bigger sway towards using cardboard takeaway containers than plastic. And that there has primarily been because these people have just basically gone in with a letter and had a chat to the managers. And a lot of the time the managers don't know how to make the change. So they've been able to make the change by showing them what their options are. So we work really closely with them. We work with Tangaroa Blue, which is the National Marine Debris Database as well. And then, yeah, for those events, we've also put it out to places like the Surf Lifesaving Club because they're super passionate about it as well. Put it out to the surf shops. You can put it out to the schools, to the local caravan parks, because a lot of people come and visit here every year and they want to make a difference while they're here and give back to the community. So, yeah, just put up flyers everywhere because someone will read it somewhere.
I should mention, guys, being from Phillip Island, growing up down there, plastic was not an issue until about 6 or 7 years ago when this Phillip Island Plastic Free sort of group started up. No one cared. And now all of a sudden in the space of, like 6 years, like Claire said, it's almost an entire plastic free island just from these voices and these community networks talking with each other and not judging what people are doing, but really working together to create this environment and this community. So really important, that networking. So thank you for that, Claire. Now, I have one last question before we move into the questions Tiana's reading right now. I can see her thinking about them. Is Phillip Island Nature Parks completely plastic free?
No. We have certainly been trying.
Yeah.
We do composting. We do our greenways, we do our soft plastics recycling. We try to reduce anything going to landfill to begin with. We've made pretty significant changes over the last few years. Once again, that's been hard to push as well because not everybody comes from an environmental background that might work within the park. So, yeah, paper tickets, but we encourage online tickets. Our food and beverage area, we work with an external company and they've been pretty amazing at changing to compostable items only, even down to, ice cream is only sold as a scoop ice cream. It doesn't come in a little packet anymore. Oh, no. So there's been some pretty big changes there, which is great. And also in our souvenir shops as well. So it used to be when I started, Peter, you might remember this as well. You used to go in there and it was full of all these tiny little plastic cheap trinkety things that you could buy and take home and they would break really quickly. We've moved away from that. So we sell a lot of those sustainable reusable items. So, would prefer if somebody took home a keep cup that's stamped with the Penguin Parade on it instead of a little tiny figurine that they might not use. And we also, any of the plush toys are made with upcycled plastics. So we're trying to make really significant changes and the majority of the shop now is plastic free. Yeah.
Well done to Steph. She's done well. It's a good area.
Yes, because Steph came from the aquarium.
Yeah. It's amazing, guys, just hearing those small actions. Like maybe you can't entirely do it, but taking those steps and really showcasing what you are doing can change someone just from visiting that one time, that 1 in 1 million visitors. Seeing that change might be enough to have that impact. And Claire mentioned Tangaroa Blue before. We are hearing from them in a couple of weeks as well. We do have Tangaroa coming in. And just like Steve and Riley said last week, not everyone's on the same page as us. And Claire just said it as well. Not everyone comes in from an environmental background. So taking those small steps and not throwing it on someone is sometimes the best action that you can take, and using your voice in your community with that. So there's my questions. Tiana, we have a couple of questions in the chat though. Would you like to ask Claire?
We do. So Mia has 2 questions. The first one is, what can we do to reduce ocean plastic? What are your top tips for us?
I think the best thing that we could probably do is, well, just start by consciously thinking about the plastic that you use in your own life. And then think about the ways that you can reduce it. So a lot of the time, the plastic that is a real problem for us out there is not the plastic that makes our computer or the chair that we sit on that we use every single day over and over and over again, but it's the plastic that we throw away after you've used it the first time, that single-use plastic. So if it means keeping a fork in your bag, or a reusable straw, or saying no to a straw when you go out, having a keep cup or a reusable drink bottle, those things make a really, really big difference, and they become habit as well. So I can't even remember the last time I brought a bottle of water when I was out to drink, and you'll find that a lot of the time those sorts of things, once you decide that you're going to stop it, there's lots of alternatives that you didn't notice were there. So if you go into anywhere and ask them to fill up your drink bottle, they will fill it up. The gas, or like the petrol station, a cafe, and I actually don't think they're allowed to refuse, well, they can't refuse table water. So you're basically in for a sure bet that they will fill up your drink bottle. Your keep cup, I just now think that my coffee tastes better out of my keep cup, because I've got a really good relationship with my keep cup. I associate my keep cup with caffeine, so I've probably got some sort of like minor drug relationship with my keep cup. But it means that I think that my coffee tastes better when I drink it out of my keep cup. So start with the really small things. If you want to really challenge yourself, you can, I did in uni, it's so much harder now than it was even just, 6 years ago. I did a month of no plastic. I tried to live an entire month of no plastic. It meant that I didn't eat any meat for a month. It meant that I didn't do lots of things for a month, but it really challenged me to think of alternatives. And while I still do use plastic in my life today, and I try not to, it was that month of really challenging myself that made me really think deeply about the way I do use plastic, where it comes from, and what those alternatives are. Because when you really want chocolate, you'll find a way to eat chocolate without plastic. It might be a different brand, or it might be something else, but there are alternatives. It's just that push to think differently. So I think it really comes down to what you do yourself, not looking at everybody, but what you do yourself, and then inspiring change from what you do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Mia's second question was, when you have a cleanup, what do you do with the plastic you collected? You mentioned sorting it, but what about after that?
Yeah, so we sort it. This has been probably the bane of my existence with this program for the last few years. It's really tricky. Our aim is to send almost nothing to landfill. It has been our aim to get to a point where we don't send anything to landfill. Some of it's easier than others. All those little hard pieces of plastic that are broken up, we generally leave for art. Things like, got one here.
One you
I've
prepared
made little marine debris cards.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I've been thinking of trying to make them to sell them, but I don't know, to spread that message. We also like the big art pieces as well, like Ricardo's beautiful seal art piece in the Penguin Parade building. We do it with school students so they can get hands-on and think about what they're doing. We recycle anything we can as well, so our bottles, the cans, but we do hit a really hard spot in regards to a lot of the plastic is what we now call contaminated, so they're too small, of all different types of plastic. So recycling facilities can't deal with such small different types of plastic, or they've often degraded to a point where that plastic is no good to use again. So we are trying to work with a couple of plastic manufacturers. Some of them are looking at what they can do with the marine debris. Unfortunately, nearly all of the options at the moment means mixing that marine debris in with what we call virgin plastic, which is brand new plastic, so that you can make something else. I'm not particularly keen on that, because it means that to get rid of our plastic, we've got to make more plastic. So it is a really tricky one. A lot of it gets stored up, a lot of it gets used for art. We've got some ladies down here that make these beautiful hand woven baskets out of all the rope that we find. I believe they do sell them in markets as well. They're gorgeous. I've got one somewhere, but it's not within reach, sorry. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of it ends up art, to be honest. But if that art can help inspire people to use less plastic, then that's great. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a good answer for all of that yet. We're trying, and if you have any good answers, we would love to hear it.
We might have one. One of our Ocean Youth kids last year, her project is called the Peter Pen Project, and she's working with Monash Uni to collect marine debris and plastic to turn it into pens. So the pen you're using here is made out of recycled plastic collected from our marine environment. So I may send you through Lucy's details, perhaps.
That would be great. I would love that, and we can see if we can work with it.
Even we can get
plastic towards her. Is it a?
Yeah, that
Lucy,
was her project last year. So there you go, guys.
Yeah,
get
maybe
inspired.
we can give it.
Now, T, there's another question there, isn't there, for Claire?
Yeah, so Max has got a really interesting one. Does the government work with programs like yours actively? And what more do you think they can be doing, or can we be doing, to bring the plastic crisis into focus of the public and the government?
That's a really great question.
Big one.
Yes, they actively are involved, and the clearest way to show this is the program, the Turn the Tide program that I've just told you about. It's been funded by a grant from the government. So it's been funded by the Biodiversity On Ground Action. They gave us $40,000 to run that program over the last few years, so that we can engage with the volunteers in the community. So often it maybe feels like the government isn't doing enough, because they often are giving the resources out for other people to do it that will probably work better within the community than what the government would themselves, with the government branding on something. It also allows maybe a little bit more of a creative and collaborative way for these projects to happen than if maybe the council was running all of them. I do think we could be doing more though. I think the governments could be probably putting a bit more of a push for us to use less plastic in general. They could be incentivizing businesses to switch resources over to things that are renewable and sustainable rather than plastic and single use. There's probably a lot that they could be doing. Better messaging as well. I think that would be really important. But the government also plays, I know in my local council area, we now have green waste bins. So they've kind of incentivized us to, compost or put cardboard and any sort of compostable products into our green waste. And they reduce the size of our landfill bin, and they only collect it every 2 weeks. So if you refuse to recycle and you refuse to put compostable things into your green waste bin, you will run out of room in your landfill bin. So they are doing lots of little things that sometimes we don't realize, or that it might be, not feel like it's straight up in our face that they're telling us to use less plastic. However, I think everyone everywhere could probably be doing more, because I see this as one of our biggest crises going forward.
It's all about creating those habits though, isn't it, Claire? Like you said, those habits of having those 3 bins. And I know a lot of our shires and councils up here have them too, guys, where you do automatically start composting, or without realizing you're recycling, because you purely don't have the space to do anything else. And before you know it, in a year, you've saved how much going to landfill without consciously thinking about it. So those actions we do forget. The government does that. And the grants you were saying, do you guys have to apply for those every time one comes up?
Yeah, so we have to apply for the grants. And it's just a case of generally Google searching environmental grants and then seeing if we've got a program that fits. There's nothing to stop, that's what a lot of community groups do as well, is that's how they get their funding to run the programs that they do. So keep an eye out on those for any projects that you might want to run. Because often these grant funders are happy to give the money over to somebody else that will do that work for them. And they get to put their name to some good work as well. So it's a double-edged thing. And just on the bins, going back to what Peter said, that's a really great way. Remember how we just spoke about how not everybody comes from that environmental background, or maybe not everybody cares or have space in their life. Sometimes it's a case of people are so focused on maybe a social or humanitarian effort that they don't have space or time in their life to think about the environmental side of things because they're focused on something else. I know I'm very focused on environmental, and I probably miss some of the other things that I could be doing. So it's a way for us to create behaviors without people having to think about why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. And we do get missed out up here a bit too, guys. Like most of us are in the city, but I was in Warrnambool on the weekend, for example, and just like in Bass Coast down where Clare is, down on Phillip Island, there's signage everywhere. There's waste bins everywhere. There's water taps everywhere. So the guys that are on the coast are starting to see a bit more of a few steps ahead than perhaps the people who are not as easily affected by this waste going into the ocean. But there is a push towards that everywhere. And just a little thing, like even as I walked the beach in Warrnambool, I just picked up 3 pieces of rubbish. Just because, you know, I could take 3 for the sea, those sort of little tiny actions. If everyone does that, all of a sudden there goes, you know, 1,000 pieces of rubbish. And Claire's volunteer program. No, I'm joking. But it's all fun and we can all get involved. So Claire said keep an eye on the Facebook page, and I will be posting links to you guys after this, saying the Facebook page and Boomerang Bags and maybe Plastic Free Phillip Island as well. I'll post all their links to you so that you can follow it too. But it looks like, is that it for questions from everyone, T?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say one thing that I've only learnt about in the last year or so is something called Red Cycle. Does anyone know what Red Cycle is?
Mm-hmm.
No, see, I only just learned it a year ago, so I am absolutely not judging. But now every single soft plastic, so your bread bags, for example, if you don't have a reusable bread bag, pretty much
jelly bag,
kind of plastics that you can scrunch up, you can actually recycle those at most Coles, and I think Woolies does it as well, supermarkets. So they have a little bin sitting out the front. We have a giant bag just full of soft plastics because they haven't really been collecting during the corona, unfortunately. But we're saving all ours so that when they finally do put those bins out again, you just take your soft plastics and they recycle them into chairs, into bollards, public seating. It's an incredible thing. It's through a company called Reples. So definitely get on that if you want to try and reduce your plastic output into landfill or into the ocean. Recycling plastic is a possibility as well. Of course, it's best to reduce your plastic use, but if you can't avoid it for whatever reason, recycling is an option.
Maybe we can do an ocean youth plastic free month and see if we're like Claire, see if we can do it.
Plastic Free July is coming up in 3 days.
Yeah, that is happening. Maybe we should get an incentive going on our Facebook group, everyone. I'll see. If anyone posts on there about it, we'll see what we can do. But we might leave it there, guys. We'll say a huge thank you to Claire. That was awesome and all local. All of this stuff is happening just around our bays. So amazing opportunity. And when all this is over, hopefully we might come down and visit and see you guys down at Phillip Island.
All right.
What do you reckon, guys? Come check out the penguins? Yeah, awesome. We'll come down for a beach cleanup with the island-wide along the tide groups. Fingers crossed, maybe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming, Claire.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much for listening. And
all right, I'll send you an email with Lucy's
anything
details.
that you do. What was that? Sorry, Peter?
I'll send you an email with Lucy's details too, and we see if we can get rid of that plastic.
That would be great. I would love that.
Amazing. Great. Thank you, Claire, for your time. I will email you after this. Thank you, everybody else, for coming along this Saturday. I mentioned Tangaroa Blue. It is actually next week that we have Tangaroa Blue next Saturday. So it's going to link in perfectly with what Claire's just been talking about locally. Tangaroa Blue a little bit more broad, but we'll see what they've been doing with all of the marine debris that they've been collecting as well. Once again, if you guys have any follow-up questions, email them to Tiana or I, and we can forward them through to Claire.